Greetings. My name's Guy Dauncey, and this is the show Change the World, where I like to explore some of the really big crises, issues, problems that we're facing as a world, not from the perspective of critique, but from the perspective of what are we going to do about it? What are the solutions? What's the vision? Today, we're going to talk about how do you build a movement and get people to work together in coalition so that it's not just individual people feeling, oh, what can I do? I'm just one person. My guest is Patricia Lane, so welcome to the show. Thanks for coming on. Patricia believes that the greatest problem facing the world is the absence of a just peace. She's worked for 40 years as a lawyer, mediator, negotiator, always speaking up for justice and working for peace. She's organized and represented farm workers, indigenous people, journalists, newspaper workers, bus drivers, mechanics, teachers, security guards, like everyone, right? And listen to this lot. She's active in building better access to justice for children, a director on the board of the Sierra Club of BC, director on the board of Canadians for Tax Fairness, chair of the board of the BC Sustainable Energy Association, and in the past, director of the Coast Capital Credit Union, also a founding partner of Lead Now, which we'll come to later in the show, and was a driving force behind the 2011 attempt to build a coalition to oust the Harper government. My goodness, you're a busy lass. So why is movement building important?
Well, I think that we're a very individualistic culture.
Yes.
And, we're kind of raised to believe that you can do anything. And there's these expressions out there of like, what can one woman do, those kinds of things. And they're not wrong. It's just that you can't really do anything unless you're doing it with other people of any significance.
Right.
And so I think our great challenge is to figure out how we can work with other people across issues, build across our disagreements, because we're going to have them, and figure out what we have in common. Because the truth is that the majority of us agree.
Yeah, because I've noticed for quite a while there's the environmental movement over here, and there's a social justice movement, and there's a housing and homelessness, and they don't have a time to speak to each other, even though in their hearts they're probably on board with each other.
Well, that's right, and in Victoria we're currently building an institution which we're calling Greater Victoria Acting Together, which is bringing unions and faith groups and not-for-profits and environmentalists and service organizations together to figure out what they want, what they think are the main priorities, and then to work on the ones they share together.
So it's called Greater Victoria Acting Together.
That's right, yeah.
We'll get the website up on the screen.
Okay, great.
And tell me more about how that got going and what they're doing.
Well, it's modeled on our sister organization in Vancouver, which is called the Metro Vancouver Alliance. And the easiest way to understand it is that Metro Vancouver Alliance has 55 organizations. It's an organization of organizations. And you can't join as an individual.
Right.
You can only join as a group. And together, I think they represent about 300,000 people, 250,000 people.
Whoa,
and that's a big voting bloc.
Yeah.
And so when Metro Vancouver Alliance said, well, living wage is a priority for all of our groups, they helped the city of Vancouver to move in that direction.
Right.
I think it's fair to say that Gregor Robertson wanted to do that anyway.
So with an issue like the living wage, the environmental community would say, well, we're busy dealing with old growth forests and stuff like that. We haven't got time. And yet they'd say, well, of course we support a living wage.
Right.
So then they'd actually come on board and help to build that strength.
Well, truthfully, in Victoria, we're doing something really different, which is we're bringing in the environmental and climate groups right from the beginning.
Okay.
And Vancouver is definitely moving in that direction, but I would say that climate hasn't been a major concern yet, but it's getting there now in Vancouver. And in Victoria, you can't organize anything here without making climate central, thanks in large part to the work of people like you.
Thank you. Yeah.
And so we're building climate groups in right from the beginning.
Right. So how many organizations are part of Greater Victoria Acting Together?
Well, we haven't actually formed yet. We take a really long time to form because we're building relationships.
Yes.
So I'll tell you about why that's so important in a minute. But so, we don't exist until we move at the speed of trust, and we're not there yet. So, but we had a training this weekend, a couple of days together with 20 groups, unions, faith groups, not-for-profits, environmental groups, service organizations, learning to talk to each other. It was absolutely fascinating. And we've had a number of those. And so we're building the relationships and we're building the trust. And we have a really solid core team that's been operating without a hitch for more than a year.
So in all of my work studying community initiatives and community economic development things, that's sitting across the table from people you wouldn't normally have a beer or a coffee with, who you've not met before, who might have misapprehensions about each other, and talking to each other is critical.
And you find out you have shared concerns. Your kids can't afford to have housing, or you've got a mental health issue in your family that's going untreated. Or
so another thing I've noticed is that when we just stay at the level of our ideas, my ideas can be different from your ideas and we end up separating. But when you start to do something together, your mind change shifts, because you're now thinking, well, I want to work together, so let's lay aside the things we don't all agree on and work on what we do agree on.
And there's so much more that we agree on. So much more.
When it comes to something big like campaign finance reform, has the movement towards that been helped by a similar coalition building, do you think?
Well, I think, to give credit where credit is due, I think Dogwood really put that on the map in the minds of, you know, many, many people. I mean, people were concerned about it, but they didn't know really how to talk about it.
So tell our viewers, just remind our viewers what Dogwood is in case people aren't familiar.
So the Dogwood Initiative is an online community which also goes offline to organize people and generates petitions and signatures and participates in demonstrations and protests. And I think they really launched the ban big money thing. Now, they're really against pipelines. But they made the connection between the influence that the oil industry has on politics and the importance of having politicians detached from that and say, okay, we've got to get big money out of politics.
It certainly seems to me that one of the core reasons for the breakdown of trust in America is the complete takeover of politics by big money.
Well, I think that's right.
And now that we're living in Canada, where there's a $1,500 limit, personal only campaign contribution, no corporations or unions allowed, BC the same. We're beginning to get a much healthier democracy. Which one person, one vote means what it says instead of one corporation, 1,000 votes.
Well, one person, one vote will mean what it says when we have proportional representation.
Yes, and that'll be coming. I'll be having we'll be talking about that next year in the lead up to next November, I believe we're going to be.
Because right now, of course, we have a series of false majorities which create the opposite of one person, one vote. So.
But if you combine clean campaign financing with no big money in the game and proper proportional voting and a ban on lobbyists taking over this, that, the other, we got a pretty good foundation.
We absolutely do, and I'm so hopeful about that. We're in for the fight of our lives. I think, you know, where there's going to be the people who gain from false majorities and first past the post have a lot to lose. And so I think there's going to be a massive disinformation campaign. I think there's going to be all kinds of bad
I believe
stuff.
in the Ontario referendum on changing the voting system, Rick Mercer, bless his angry heart in this case, did a rant, which he said, this is so complicated, no one can understand it, it'll give you terrible minorities, shouldn't do it. And he just wiped out all those votes just by doing that.
Well, that's disinformation.
It's really disappointing.
And, you know, it's like Canadian people are more stupid than Irish people?
Yes.
Come on. I'm Irish, I'm also Canadian, all of Europe.
All of Europe except Britain is working with coalition governments. And now we actually have a close to coalition government.
We do, and so the Greens and the NDP are modeling the power that can happen when you've got
So what is it, if you have someone who's thinking, I'm a true conservative, and someone else thinking I'm a true NDP or Green, what brings them together?
Well, on the issue of fair voting, first of all, I think everybody wants to protect their family. That's a shared idea. Their clan can be bigger than family. But I think that there are some people who, I think we can disagree about how we do that. And I think that, but I think everybody also has a shared sense of fairness.
I think that's fundamental.
You know, it was the Gordon Campbell government, it was a Liberal government that really put proportional representation on the table.
And everyone shares a concern for their children and grandchildren and what the future's going to be like for them.
That's right. And the reality is that nobody wants to have their children's future controlled by big oil. Like, nobody really wants that.
And most people know that big oil is going to make a transition. We're going to do a transition to 100% renewable energy.
Absolutely, I mean, there's been some polling done and people know that you know, we're moving in that direction, and they welcome it.
So this is a big, bizarre, big thought. Whereas America is heading to this bigger and bigger divide, do you think we can head to this new unification of consensus around the kind of future we need to build for ourselves?
I do, I really do. And the interesting thing about British Columbia is that we are often in the lead.
Yeah.
We were in the lead around the Labour Code. We were in the lead. The Barrett government brought in
Yes.
a whole bunch of things like human rights tribunals.
Yeah.
We were in the lead then.
And
we were also in the lead for the neoconservative agenda, for the neoliberal agenda that came in as, you know, the restraint and stuff.
Yes.
And now we're in the lead for proportional representation.
Yes.
And for the kind of protection of the environment that we really
And
need.
you helped to set up the organization called Lead Now.
That's
Do you want
right,
to tell
yeah.
people what Lead Now is?
So Lead Now is an online community, which I think has about 500,000 members now,
Yeah.
which isn't too bad because we just formed it 6 years ago. Yeah.
I'm a member of it, yeah.
Yeah. So you can go on online and
what do they do?
Join. And they set shared priorities, so they canvass their members once or twice a year. What are the things that are most important to
Yeah.
you? And then they organize around that in a variety of ways. So during the 2015 election, they identified key ridings where there was a chance that a progressive, Liberal, Green, or New Democrat could defeat or win the seat.
Right.
And then they put boots on the ground to help make that
Right.
happen.
So they're helping people work together.
That's right. But they've also done all kinds of other things, like fighting Bill C-51, for example.
Is there one particular book that you find inspiring around this work of coalition building?
Well, Matt Price, who's long been a leader, a leading thinker in this area, he lives in the Cowichan Valley, you should have
Yes.
him on the show, has just written a book called Organizing for Change.
Organizing for Change.
Yeah, I really recommend it. It's very thoughtful because it talks about the importance not just of collectivism, but also relationships and being strategic, which are the three things I think that we really need.
Collectivism, relationships, being strategic.
That's right. So you can't change the world by clicking.
Right.
But we also are not going to be able to change the world without clicking.
Yes.
In this day and age.
A lot of us believe that we can just click our way and,
That's
oh,
right.
I'm an activist, I clicked a button and said like.
That's right, yeah. Well, it's not a bad thing,
Yes.
but it's only a bad thing if you think that's all you have to do.
So the other ones are strategic, working, and relationships.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Why are relationships, that part of the picture, so important?
So when I was 24 years old, newly graduated from law school, I came to British Columbia. And I came because I'm attracted to this beautiful place, but also I wanted to live where people were active and engaged.
Yeah.
And where there was a government that supported my values. We had an NDP government here, which was really interested in human rights, in protecting workers, in protecting women, and recognizing Indigenous rights and title, and protecting the environment. And so that was where I wanted to live. And in 1983, the first past the post system gave us a false majority SOCRED government.
Right.
And
So the majority of British Columbians were against it.
That's right.
Okay.
But the election was won in the way that first past the post system wins elections.
Yes.
And the social credit government used their majority, their false majority, to announce that they were going to implement restraint. Remember when that was a new idea?
Yes.
And they said we're going to cut. We're going to dismantle women's transition centers. We're going to eliminate the rent controls. We're going to give tenants no security. We're going to cut back labor standards. We're going to take away collective bargaining. A really big swath, right?
Yeah.
And we would call that a social contract that was being rewritten.
So today we call that austerity, the way it's been done in Britain.
Austerity is that's right. And so nobody really was aware of austerity, or was a new idea to them. The Fraser Institute seeded the idea here.
Yes.
Well, within 6 months, this massive coalition had formed with unions, labor groups, women's groups, seniors, human rights groups, massive. In fact, we had one demonstration with 60,000 people on the street in Vancouver.
Wow.
And we were planning a series of staged general strikes to fight back against, or staged strikes. And there was a general strike planned, which was well on the way to being implemented at the end of November in 1983, which would have seen 200,000 people off the job. Well, the Operation Solidarity, or the Solidarity Coalition, was this amazing opportunity for people across sectors to work together. the unions negotiated an agreement which did what they had to do, which was to protect their members. So
Yes.
they protected collective bargaining rights. And then they did something really unusual for unions, which was they extracted a promise from the government to consult about all these other things. And then they settled and went back to work. And the government broke its promise, the social credit government broke its promise, and the consultations didn't happen.
Yeah.
And there are still wounds between amongst progressives around from that era.
Wow.
It all happened really quickly. It had to, because it was so urgent.
Yes. Yeah.
And we did build this massive coalition, and it was hugely successful in terms of bringing people together. But it fell apart really quickly too, because we didn't really know each other.
Yeah.
And so we didn't have the relationships to sustain us.
Yes.
Our institutions didn't know each other. That we were kind of all foreign, and everybody went back to their corners.
Is it easier in a smaller city like Victoria compared to Vancouver to build those relationships? Because you bump into people more often?
Maybe. It's not harder,
Yeah.
but it is, people are still pretty insular. People tell
Yeah.
me Victoria's a hard city to break into because it's insular, right? So, and I think online work helps to break down some of those barriers. We didn't have that in 1983. So I learned from that it's really, really important for sustained change to focus on relationships.
Yeah.
And the reality is that we have a chance now because we have an NDP Green coalition.
Yes.
I mean, they don't call it that, and I shouldn't either, really, but we have a
They call it
strategic alliance.
It's an alliance, yes,
Yeah.
it's an alliance.
And
And they represent 59% of all voters.
they do, and they have their differences, but there's a subset that they really agree on.
Yes.
But they still need movements behind them to say, we're here, we have your back. When
Yeah.
you start getting flack from the groups that don't like this, we have your back. And that's a really important thing. It's
Well, I think
also
that
really important for movements to say, well, we like what you've just done, and
Yeah.
here's what else we'd like you to do.
I think one of the big problems I notice around politics and social movements is that people will mobilize to get a government elected. Then they all sit back.
Right.
And they don't realize that the government's got so many competing agendas. Its desk is full. They can't focus on one for more than a time.
Exactly, yeah.
And unless those groups are still
Yeah.
saying, here's why it's important, here's the
why it's
data, here's the facts, ringing people right
Yeah.
into their MPs, right into their MLAs.
Yeah.
And the government has to know where the pressure comes from.
And it doesn't need to be oppositional pressure.
No.
It can be very helpful.
Yes.
And I think people have two reasons for sitting back. One is people are busy. We
Yeah.
got to get our kids to school. We got to look after our mom, whatever. And so they kind of heave a sigh of relief and say someone else can do it. And the reality is that while we can be episodic, we can't let go.
So in America, Obama, when he got elected, he said in his initial speech, I need you to keep involved. And
Right.
it didn't really happen. People did. Bernie Sanders
There's
has
a
been
lot.
saying the same thing. He calls it our revolution.
Yeah.
Keep engaged, keep engaged. So I feel it is happening more now.
I really agree. I think we learned a lot from Obama and from Sanders.
Yes.
And I don't think people are disengaged now. I think they're interested.
Yeah.
I think they're watching, but I don't think they're disengaged.
Do you think, though, that people need to have a level of focus for engagement bigger than just the political party? Instead of identifying yourself as an NDP or a Green, we need to identify with what that vision is
Absolutely.
that we all believe in.
Absolutely.
And some bits of it the Greens will express the best, and some bits the NDP, and some bits around the need for enterprise, it could be that the Liberals are going to express the best.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
But
yeah.
it's to have our minds coalescing around that shared vision, because the vision attracts us.
That's
if
right.
we're always complaining, I don't like this, I don't like that, our spirits get sort of ground down a bit.
I like to remember that Martin Luther King didn't say, I had a nightmare. Right? So we have a dream.
Absolutely.
Right?
And I see so much on the media about dystopia. I mean, the new Blade Runner movie, it's all just dystopia. And people are feeling really depressed
They are,
about the
yeah.
future, and especially with Trump there. So
Yeah.
towards the end of this, I'm going to ask you to speak straight to camera about the power of vision. But how important is it to focus on the positive and the solutions instead of just complaining?
Well, Naomi Klein's written a really good book called No Is Not Enough.
Yes.
And we're here. We've arrived. Like,
Yeah.
we are the majority. We can't
Yes.
just say no. And so we have a responsibility to learn what it is we want and to articulate that
Yeah.
and not to dismiss each other
Yeah.
for having different ideas. So we have a responsibility to focus on those relationships and to learn. Maybe, you and I have had our differences over the years, but we have a relationship. So we'll phone each other and say, what about this? And so there's that connection is really, really important. So I think we're very individualistic. We have a tendency to just dismiss somebody because we don't like one stand or something.
I think it's lazy thinking to do that.
Maybe it's lazy, or maybe it's just that we're so busy. But we also think, I've run into this before, I'm never going to know everything there is to know about, whatever the issue is. I'm not a specialist in very many things. And so I trust people.
Yeah.
So if Sephora Berman is going to say something, I'm going to pay attention.
Yes.
If Guy Dauncey is going to say something, I'm going to pay attention.
Well, the flip side to that, I just taken on a new task to sort of write a new book, redefining and reinventing the entire economy.
Right.
And so on one hand, I'm doing a huge amount of reading, but the flip side of that is I'm realizing how much I didn't know coming into this.
Yeah, exactly.
And I lived with that, not understanding, not really knowing how central banking works, not really knowing how money is created. And now I understand that stuff, and I go, wow. And I can see a vision coalescing around
But the
that.
reality is that most people aren't going to understand how central banking works.
Well,
It's
they
not
will
a
when I've
priority
written an
for
easy
them.
chapter about it, and they
No,
will.
but they won't. Most people won't read the book.
Yes, they will.
So what do we do about that? Well, one of the things we do is we rely on our institutions.
Yes.
So we have to build institutions we trust.
Yes.
And we can't do that unless we build relationships.
Yes. So one of the areas of Italy where they have a very strong cooperative
Monte
economy in
Carlo. No,
Emilia
that's
Romagna, they've been building trust for 100 years now.
Yeah.
And I've read it, and it is about relationships. It's not just,
Absolutely.
it's family relationships and a shared sense of all working together.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
And we all need to pull ourselves away from a fixation with bad news and gloomy news and stuff like that.
And also with arguing about details.
Yeah.
Okay, so we can have an argument about this, but the reality is we have shared values. We're going to join hands and work together on the big projects.
Yeah. How soon do you think that Greater Victoria acting together before it launches?
I don't really know. It's not up to me. It's up to the
Up to
organization.
the feeling of the generic consensus.
Yeah, we're definitely making progress, and we've already made a big difference in some ways just from coming together.
Yeah.
So we can see impacts that are happening already.
Well, that's encouraging. And so what's the biggest changes you hope to see coming from the new Green NDP alliance?
Well, I think we need a new attitude towards democracy and engagement. I think the biggest thing would be proportional representation.
Right.
Because in proportional representation countries, more people tend to be engaged.
Yes.
And so if we have a more engaged public, then our values will be more reflected in policy.
Yes.
So I really do think that's the most
So some
important
people are
thing.
arguing that if a tiny party gets votes, they can, like in Israel, they can cause extremism. But in Germany, I believe the rule is that unless you get 5% of the vote, you get 0. I've heard some people say you need 10% of the vote.
Well, there's been 12 studies about this in Canada, and every single one of them has recommended a 4 or 5% limit. But the reality is, one of the ironies, this is why it's disinformation. Proportional representation came into Europe to prevent extreme parties like fascists
I didn't know that.
coming.
There you go.
That's why they brought it in.
Yeah.
And so first past the post gives extreme parties like Trump
Yes.
a false majority.
Totally. Yeah.
And proportional representation prevents that because it's a way of making sure that more diversity is represented.
in Germany, which is a really stable, large
Absolutely.
country,
Yeah.
always has 2 or 3 parties
Absolutely.
governing together.
Yeah, that's right. And Denmark.
Yes.
And, I
All of
mean,
them.
it's just, that's right. If you think about the unstable places in the world, they're first past the post.
Yeah.
The UK, Canada,
Yes.
the US, some extent.
Well, I wouldn't call
Brazil.
Canada unstable, but we haven't got a fair.
Forgotten Mr. Harper.
We had Harper thinking he was like 33% of the people only supporting him.
That's
at times,
right.
yeah.
So a lot of his policies were unstable
Yeah.
because what happens is he implements a whole lot of things. Then the
Yes.
Liberals come in and change them, maybe not as fast as we'd like. And then the next time we get Harper, he changes them back.
And just a
Can
quick-
you imagine how much that costs taxpayers?
Quick thing to one side, do you find it encouraging that now the leaders of the 3 big parties are all age 45, 38, 38, right?
Well, maybe. I'm not such a big divider around age.
Okay.
Like, I think people like you and I have interesting things to say, and I think there's plenty of millennials who have problematic things to say.
So why don't you take 2 minutes as we begin to wind up the show and just speak from your heart straight to camera and tell our viewers, you know, what's in your heart.
I've spent my entire life trying to unite progressives. Now, in 2017, I am finally really hopeful. Why is this time different? I think in 3 important ways. First, we, the majority, know where we are going. As Stephen Kretzmann from Oil Change International notes, we know the end game. And, as Naomi Klein says, understanding that our future must be fossil fuel free changes everything. We see that our future must be people-centered. We cannot have billionaires running things while others starve on the street or die in the fentanyl crisis. We know each child and elder is precious. We are not separate from the environment, that health care for all is a basic hallmark of a decent society. We welcome learning about reconciliation. And most important, we know that the future will be different, and it will be best if we design it together. We see our strength is love, and love is stronger than hate. Second, we're investing in relationships. We know we must seek each other out across differences. Organizations like the Metro Vancouver Alliance and Greater Victoria Acting Together are growing by leaps and bounds. Third, we are choosing strategies that unite us and divide them. We might disagree about the economics of Site C, but the vast majority of British Columbians want to create good jobs, retool for a low emissions future, and respect Indigenous concerns. So yes, I am hopeful. We know the end game, we know relationships matter, and we know we must always act to unite us and divide them. To quote Stephen Kretzmann again, the storms are coming. Hold the line, lash yourself to the mast, do whatever you and those you love need to do, but keep an eye fixed on that point on the horizon. It's closer than it appears.
Well, thanks, Patricia. That's like, we've got to keep an eye on the vision. Well, thank you
right.
so much for all your leadership in so many ways over so and many more years to come, right?
Yeah.
So my name is Guy Dauncey. This has been the show Change the World. My guest has been Patricia Lane. For my part, one of my contributions is this book called Journey to the Future, A Better World is Possible, which takes all these great ideas and puts them together.
Book. Read it.
In one city in the year 2032 to show how, yes, we can build a better future. If you like this show, tune in next week and we'll have more of the same. And thanks for watching.